Lesson 9.4, solving quadratic equations by completing the square. So what we're going to do is we are going to solve some quadratic equations that are in the form of x squared plus bx. We're going to do that by completing the square. So let's take a look. So step 1 is to find half of b, the coefficient of x. Square that, then add it, and then we're going to square it. So I know that sounded way more complicated, but let's take a look. So if we look at example 1, complete the square for each expression and then factor. So once we complete the square, we'll be able to factor. So algebraically speaking, if we have x squared plus bx plus half of b squared, we'll end up with x plus half of b squared as our factored trinomial. So let's take a look. X squared plus 18x. So here we have step 1, where we're going to find half of b. So remember, we've got a x squared plus bx plus c. And today we're looking at b. So here that's 18. So I'm going to take half of b, which is half of 18, which is 6. Step 2, I'm going to square that. Whoops. Oh my gosh, half of 18 is 9. So mistakes happen. We just have to make sure we try and catch those. So 9 squared here is 81. Now, step 3, we're going to rewrite this. So we're rewriting it as x squared plus 18x plus 81. Now, I'm going to move to this step, which is factoring. So that gives me x plus 9 squared. All right, let's take a look at b. This one's a little bit more challenging because, as you can see, we do not have an even number here. So what I'm going to do for step 1, I've got 17 halves, or negative 17 halves. I'm going to leave that as is, so I'm not dealing with the decimal. Then I'm going to go ahead and square that to negative 17 halves squared, which gives me 289 fourths, which are both perfect squares, which are going to make it a little bit easier to factor. And then for 3, I now have x squared minus 17x plus 289 fourths. And then when I factor that, we end up with x minus 17 halves squared. Okay, now it is your turn. Hit pause, complete 1, 2, and 3, and then hit play to continue when you're done to check your work. All right, so number 1, half of 10 is 5. 5 squared is 25. Rewrite my equation, x squared plus 10x plus 25 gives me x plus 5 squared. For 1, negative 4 halves equals negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. When I complete the expression, I end up with x squared minus 4x plus 4, and then factor that, x minus 2 squared. For 1, I'm going to leave it as 7 halves. 7 halves squared is 49 fourths. So I end up with x squared plus 7x plus 49 fourths. When I factor that, I'll have x plus 7 halves squared. Let's take a look at how we're going to solve equations by completing the square. So in order to do this, we need to make sure we're in the form of x squared plus bx equals d. Now, I want to go back to the thought of when we first started solving equations. If you recall, our step 2 for solving algebraic equations is to balance the equation. Remember, what we do to one side, we have to do to the other in order to balance. So if I add 2 to this side, I need to add 2 to this side to remain balanced. So keep that in mind as we are solving these problems. So what I want to do is to complete the square here. Remember, we're going to find half of b and square it. So let's do that. So we have x squared minus 18x. Now, I want c. So that's where we found half of b and squared it, gave us c. So half of b is negative 9. Square that. So we're going to add negative 9 squared. But remember, what I do to one side, I need to do to the other, or I'm no longer balancing the equation. So I've got x squared minus 18x plus 81 equals 64. Negative 17 plus 81 is going to give me 64. Now that I've got this completed, I can find, or I can factor this. So I've got x minus 9 squared gives me 64. If you notice, I have two perfect squares here. So I'm going to find the square root here. So I have x minus 9 equals plus or minus 8. Don't forget that. So now we can solve for x. So I have x minus 9 equals 8, and x minus 9 equals negative 8. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So one of my solutions is x equals 17. Add 9 to both sides here, x equals 1. So my solutions here are x equals 17 and x equals 1. Now, what happens when we don't have it in the form of, or we have it in standard form and we actually want it in the form of ax squared plus bx equals c? Well, we can do that by moving this around. So we're going to add 10 to both sides. So now I'm in the form of 2x squared plus 12x equals 10. Now, one of the things I can do here is all of these are even. So I'm going to go ahead and divide by 2. So I have x squared plus 6x equals 5. Now I can complete the square. So half of 6, so that gives me x squared plus 6x plus half of 6, so that's 3 squared equals 5 plus 3 squared. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I have x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 5x, or 5 plus 9 gives me 14. Not a perfect square, so let's see what happens here. So I end up here with x plus 3 squared equals 14. Now, I'm going to find the square root of both of these. So I have x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 14. So let's see, x plus 3 equals the square root of 14. X plus 3 equals the negative square root of 14. So I'm going to subtract 3 from all my sides. So x equals, let me get out my calculator here, find out what the square root of, let's see, with this calculator, I have to hit the square root button first. So 3.7, let's see, minus 3 gives me approximately 74 hundredths. And if I have the negative square root of 14 minus 3, x equals negative 6 and 74 hundredths. So my two answers are right there. All right, now it is your turn. Go ahead, try these problems, hit pause. When you're done, hit play to check your work. All right, for number 4, when you complete the square, you should end up with x equals 3, x equals negative 1. For 5, m is approximately negative 71 hundredths and negative 11 29ths. For 6, remember, you can't have a coefficient for g, so we're going to divide by 3 here. We end up with g is approximately 6 65/100 and 1 35/100. If you need more time to take a look at this work, don't forget to hit pause. All right, moving on to example 8, real-life application. You decide to put a rug on a floor. You want the rug to cover 100 square feet and have a uniform border of the floor visible as shown. Find the width of the border to the nearest inch. So we know the rug is going to cover 100 square feet. So if this distance is 16 feet, this is 16 minus 2x. If this is 12 feet, then the border, or then the rug is 12 minus 2x for the length. So now that we can find area, we have area equals length times width. Doesn't matter which one you have for length or width. So when I go ahead and FOIL that out, I get 100 equals 192 minus 56x plus 4x squared. I'm going to subtract 192 from both sides to get negative 92 equals negative 50. Actually, you know what? Let's rewrite that better. So 4x squared minus 56x. Now, I do not want a coefficient here, so I'm going to divide all of this by 4. So now I have negative 23 equals x squared minus 14x. So I'm going to complete the square here. So half of 14 is 7, or negative 7. Double that, we get 49. So I have negative 23 plus 49 equals x squared minus 14x plus 49. So I now have 26 equals x minus 7 squared. Find the square root of both of these. Unfortunately, I ran out of room. So I have plus or minus 5 1/10 equals x minus 7. So I have 5 1/10 equals x minus 7. Negative 5 1/10 equals x minus 7. So I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So I have, let's see, add that up. I have 12 1/10 equals x. And then here I have 1 9/10 equals x. Now, if I use this, it's going to be way too big here. So that's not going to work. So this one's out, leaving me with this answer. Now the question is to the nearest inch, and this here is in feet. So I need to take 1 9/10, multiply that by 12, and I'm going to get approximately 23 inches. Make sure you check your math here, feet, inches. All right, you're all set. Go ahead and get started on today's assignment.